My parents threw me out because my sister was expecting a baby. Now they're homeless and begging for my forgiveness. Hey, everyone. Before we dive into today's story, I need a quick favor. We've noticed the channel hasn't been doing as well lately, and one of the best ways you can support us is by subscribing. It's fast, completely free, and helps us keep bringing you great content. Your support means everything to us. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now, let's get into it. All right, Reddit, here's the situation. I've been holding on to this story for a while now, debating whether or not to share it. But after recent events, I figured, why the hell not? Just a heads up, this is going to be a long one, LOL. I'm 19 now, but this whole disaster started about a year ago, right after my 18th birthday. And let me tell you, my family couldn't have picked a worse time to go full drama mode, smack in the middle of finals week. Because, apparently, the universe thought, you know what would make cramming for physics even more exciting? Being kicked out of your house. First thing you need to know is that my family dynamic was already a mess, like Jerry Springer-level dysfunction. My half-sister Emma, not her real name obviously, but trust me, she's the definition of an Emma, suddenly announces she's pregnant. The father, her boyfriend Tyler, who is exactly the guy you're imagining. Boat shoes, daddy's credit card, the whole preppy package. Next thing I know, my stepdad, Rick, is saying we have to make space for Emma to move back in. Quick backstory. Rick is Emma's biological father, not mine. He and my mom met in college and had this on-again, off-again relationship during their sophomore year. When my mom got pregnant with Emma, they had to figure things out, which they never actually did. They split up after graduation, but Rick was still sort of in the picture. And by sort of, I mean he showed up whenever it was convenient for him. Fast forward a few years, my mom meets my biological dad, let's call him James. From what little I know, he was actually a good guy. They dated for about 2 years, got married, had me, and then he passed away in a car accident when I was just a baby. But there's more to that story, something I only recently discovered. And holy hell, it's insane. Anyway, after my dad died, Rick somehow weaseled his way back into my mom's life. They got back together, and by the time I was 3 or 4, they were married. And that's when things really went off the rails. By the way, side note, this is where my cat, Chaos, enters the picture. I adopted him from a shelter when I was 14, and this little dude has seen some things. He arrived right when everything in my house was getting tense, and I swear he's been silently judging my family's nonsense ever since. Now let me paint a picture of what growing up in this house was actually like. You know those wholesome blended families they show on TV? Yeah, this was nothing like that. From the very start, Rick made it painfully obvious that he was here for my mom and Emma, not me. I was just, I don't know, the trial version of a kid that came with the package. And I'm not exaggerating. This man would literally walk into a room, acknowledge Emma, and then act like I wasn't even there. I'll never forget this one time when I was 12. I worked so hard on this difficult science project and got an A+. I was so excited to show him, and this man just walked right past me like I was a ghost. Meanwhile, Emma could get a C on something, and he'd act like she cured cancer. Oh, Meg Princess, you tried your best. And Emma? She learned from the best. She treated me like some random extra in the perfect little movie that was her life. Remember that episode of Friends where Rachel finds out her sister pierced her daughter's ears without permission? Emma was worse. When I was 8, she actually convinced me to let her cut my hair while I was sleeping, completely ruining a family photo session. My mom was furious, but Rick? He thought it was hilarious. Kids being kids, he said. Yeah, okay. The best part was watching my mom pretend like everything was fine. She'd constantly say, "We're all family. I love you both equally." But you know what? Actions speak louder than words. Anytime Rick or Emma pulled their usual BS, she'd let it slide, make excuses, or tell me I was being too sensitive. And I tried. I really did. When I was younger, I bent over backwards trying to get them to like me. I would help Emma with her homework, even though she was older than me. I'd try talking to Rick about sports or whatever he was into, but after a while, you just give up. Even Chaos understood. This cat would just watch the family drama unfold, curled up beside me, staring like, yeah, these humans are ridiculous. He always stuck by me whenever Rick called one of his family meetings, which were really just lectures about how I was doing everything wrong, while Emma sat there smirking. For years, I thought this was normal. I legitimately thought this was just how blended families worked. Then I started spending time at my friend Jake's house, and that was when I realized just how messed up my situation really was. His stepdad actually talked to him, helped him with school, treated him like a real person. But that was my life, tiptoeing around Rick and Emma while my mom acted like everything was fine. Anyway, back to the disaster at hand. They decided Emma had to move back home because she needed support during this special time. Those were my mom's exact words, I kid you not. Mind you, Emma was 24 years old, had a stable work-from-home job, and Tyler made good money at his corporate gig. But somehow they just couldn't handle living in their own apartment while she was pregnant. So they decided that I had to give up my bedroom. Not Rick's home office, which, by the way, used to be Emma's old room before she moved out. He barely used that space, maybe twice a year, to pretend he actually had something important to do. But nope, my room was the one that had to go. Because obviously, where else could Emma possibly sleep? The living room? One of the other unoccupied rooms in the house? No, that would be unthinkable. Oh, and let me just take a moment to mention my cat, Chaos. At this point, he was a one-eyed rescue I had adopted when I was 14, and honestly, he had been the only consistent and reliable member of my so-called family. The day they told me I had to move out of my own room, Chaos was perched on my desk, staring at them with his one good eye like, "Are you serious, Ren?" I swear that cat had more sense than the rest of them combined. The timing was what really got me. They dropped this bombshell literally the day before my physics final. I'm not exaggerating. There I was, trying to commit formulas to memory, when Rick suddenly barrels into my room, as always without knocking, to inform me that I needed to start packing because Emma required the space immediately. I tried to argue. I pointed out the obvious. I was in the middle of finals. Emma already had her own apartment, and this entire situation made absolutely no sense. But Rick went full dictator mode, yelling about how I was legally an adult now and how he wasn't obligated to let me stay under his roof anymore. Totally normal way to treat your stepchild, right? But you want to know what really broke me? What finally made me realize just how completely messed up this situation was? My mom. She just stood there while Rick went off. And when I turned to her, hoping for some kind of support, you know what she said? "We need to focus on the real grandchild now." The real grandchild. Because apparently I didn't count. Chaos actually hissed at her when she said that, which only confirmed what I had always suspected. He was the only one in that house with any common sense. I'm not going to lie, that hurt. I had always known that Rick and Emma never truly considered me family, but hearing my own mother basically confirm it, that hit differently. And that, folks, is how this disaster started. Me just trying to survive finals week, suddenly being forced to face homelessness because my half-sister was having a baby and decided she needed my bedroom. Meanwhile, my one-eyed cat was the only one who seemed to recognize how ridiculous this all was. And this? This is where everything really fell apart. Let me break down how they made the announcement because, honestly, it was a masterclass in manipulation. I was in my room studying for finals. Chaos, as usual, was amusing himself by knocking my pencils off my desk one by one because, apparently, That's peak entertainment for a cat. Then, out of nowhere, I hear Emma's overly excited voice coming from downstairs. This was already suspicious because Emma never just stopped by unless she wanted something. This was the same girl who skipped my high school graduation because she had a hair appointment. So, yeah, when she suddenly showed up on a Sunday night with Tyler, I knew something was off. Then my mom called me downstairs for a family meeting. Pro tip. In my house, family meeting was just code for let's all gather around and discuss how OP is a massive disappointment. But this time it was different. Emma was practically glowing, practically bouncing on the couch with excitement, while Tyler sat beside her with this awkward, nervous smile like he was wondering if he left the stove on. So we're all gathered in the living room, except for Chaos, who, being the drama king he is, was watching from the top of the bookshelf like some judgmental overlord. Then Emma starts this big speech about change and new beginnings. I sat there assuming she had finally landed the promotion she had been bragging about for months. But nope. We're pregnant. First of all, no, we weren't pregnant. Emma was pregnant. Tyler just had bad aim, but sure, whatever. You should have seen my mom and Rick's reactions. They reacted like Emma had just announced she had cured cancer. My mom started crying. Rick did this weird, proud dad thing. And Tyler, he stood there looking like he was still trying to process what had just happened. Once the crying and hugging were over, Emma started outlining her plans. Now, let's not forget, Emma and Tyler already had their own apartment, and it wasn't a bad place. 2 bedrooms, decent area, close to their jobs. But apparently, that wasn't good enough for the baby. So, we've been thinking, Emma began, as if what she was about to say was completely reasonable. And we really want to move back home during the pregnancy. She said it so casually, like she wasn't just suggesting 2 fully grown adults move into an already full house. And, of course, my mom was immediately on board. Of course, sweetie, we'll figure it out. Meanwhile, I was sitting there, mentally calculating where the hell they planned to fit 2 extra people into this house. Rick chimed in with, "We can turn my office back into a bedroom." And for about 2.5 seconds, I almost thought they were actually being reasonable for once. But nope. Turns out Rick's office wasn't going to be their bedroom. It was going to be the nursery. Emma and Tyler, they were taking my room. Because, obviously, the pregnant princess couldn't possibly sleep in a converted office, or, God forbid, stay in her own apartment. And the best part, their reasoning. Emma started explaining how Tyler occasionally traveled for work, like maybe once every few months, and she didn't want to be alone during her pregnancy. Oh, and living at home would help them save money for the baby since they wouldn't have to pay rent. How convenient. I tried pointing out that this was completely unfair. You know, considering the fact that I was still in high school and had finals to deal with. Apparently, that was the wrong thing to say. Rick immediately lost it. "Emma needs support right now," he snapped, acting like I had just suggested dumping her on the street. "This is what family does." Oh, family, huh? Because they had really set the bar high for what family was supposed to be. For years, my mom just sat there, nodding along, probably already planning the baby shower in her head. No one asked how I felt about any of it. No one even acknowledged my presence. It was like I had suddenly become invisible. Even Tyler looked uneasy, just standing there, shifting awkwardly from foot to foot, probably wondering how he went from having his own place to moving in with his girlfriend's family. But he didn't say a word. He just kept tugging at his collar like it had suddenly gotten too tight. Meanwhile, Chaos had perched himself on the arm of my chair, giving everyone the most unimpressed stare, like, "Are you kidding me, right now?" I swear that cat had better instincts than most people. But wait, it gets worse. Emma then started gushing about how excited she was for us to bond during her pregnancy, talking about how I could help with the baby. Ah, so that was the real plan. They wanted a free babysitter. The very next day, Emma and Tyler started moving their stuff in, literally wasting no time after their big announcement. I was still trying to study for my chemistry final when I had to watch Tyler lug boxes up and down the stairs, looking about as uncomfortable as a cat in a bathtub. The best part? They didn't even wait for me to pack up my things. While I was at school, Emma had already started putting her clothes into my closet. I came home to find half my belongings shoved into garbage bags and dumped in the hallway. Chaos was not pleased. He spent the entire afternoon knocking Emma's overpriced makeup brushes into the toilet. Good cat, but things really took a turn about 2 months into this nightmare. Emma started having morning sickness episodes. And by episodes, I mean she would dramatically collapse onto the couch every single morning and demand someone bring her ginger ale and crackers, always right as I was trying to get ready for school. Funny how her sickness always seemed to act up at the most inconvenient times. Rick and Mom, of course, ate it up. You'd think she was the first person in human history to ever be pregnant. Meanwhile, Tyler looked more and more like a man rethinking all of his life choices. He suddenly started working late a lot. Can't say I blamed him. Then came the ultimatum trademark. At this point, we were a few months into Emma's pregnancy, and I had actually started to think that maybe, just maybe, I could tolerate this situation for a little while longer. I had managed to carve out a tiny study area in the basement. Chaos had claimed the top of the dryer as his personal throne, and I was counting down the days until graduation. Then Rick called another family meeting. Picture this. Emma sprawled across the couch like a fragile Victorian woman overcome with emotion, Mom hovering nearby with a concerned expression, and Rick standing with his arms crossed, attempting to look authoritative. "We need to discuss expectations," Rick began. Immediately, I knew I was about to hear some serious nonsense. Emma's going to need a lot of support once the baby arrives. I sat there thinking, yeah, that's literally why she has a boyfriend. But I kept my mouth shut. Chaos, who had learned to despise these family meetings just as much as I did, sat on the windowsill, glaring at everyone with his signature one-eyed death stare. Then Rick dropped the bombshell. "We think it would be best if you helped out with the baby. You do live here rent-free, after all." First of all, I was 17 when this conversation started. Second, excuse me? Oh, but it gets better. They had already come up with a whole plan. Since I was just going to community college, their words, not mine, I could help out during the day while Emma worked from home. In exchange, I could continue living in, checks notes, my own basement. The list of responsibilities was ridiculous. Wake up early to help with the baby so Emma could rest. Watch the baby while Emma worked. Run errands for her because new moms need support. Basically, they wanted a live-in nanny, who also paid rent in the form of endless gratitude for the privilege of sleeping in their basement. Mom sat there, nodding along like this was completely reasonable. Emma had this smug little smile, clearly enjoying every second of it. I glanced at Tyler, half hoping he would say something. Nope. Dude was suddenly very invested in whatever was on his phone. I wish I could say I stood up right then and told them all to go screw themselves. But honestly, I just sat there in shock. I had always known they didn't see me as an equal family member. But this was a whole new level of audacity. The best reaction, though, chaos. Right in the middle of Rick's speech about family responsibility, my cat casually turned his head and vomited, directly onto Emma's designer handbag, the $500 one she'd been bragging about all week. The timing? Absolutely perfect. The next few days were tense. They kept hinting that I was being selfish and ungrateful. Because, of course, real family members support each other. Emma even started practicing her mom voice, giving me orders like she was already the queen of the house. That was when I started looking for an escape plan. I applied for every scholarship I could find. I quietly reached out to friends to see if anyone had a spare room, but I kept it low-key. I let them think they had me trapped. Little did they know I had an ace up my sleeve, or more accurately, a one-eyed cat and a best friend with amazing parents. But here's the problem. When you're 18, still in high school, and don't have a job, your options are pretty limited. And then there was Chaos. I wasn't about to leave him behind. Enter Jake. Jake had been my ride or die since 6th grade, the kind of friend who would help you hide a body with 0 questions asked. Not that we ever did that. Probably. His family had witnessed my disaster of a home life for years, so they knew what kind of train wreck I was dealing with. The day after Rick's family responsibility speech, I was at Jake's house playing Xbox, aka venting about my situation while getting destroyed in Call of Duty. His mom, Sarah, overheard everything. Now, Sarah. She was the anti-Emma. Genuinely kind. Didn't act like the world revolved around her. You know, a normal person. She pulled me aside and said, "You know you always have a place here, right?" I nearly cried on the spot. It hit differently having someone's mom actually care about me. But I didn't want to be a burden. I told her I'd figure something out. Then she hit me with this truth bomb. "Honey, we've been waiting for you to need our help for years." She told me they'd had the guest room ready since I was 16. Turns out they had watched my situation at home go from bad to worse and had been waiting for the moment when I needed them. They knew Rick and Emma were toxic as hell, and they had literally been preparing for the day I would finally need a way out. I realized I might actually need an escape plan. The fact that Jake's family had kept an entire guest room open just in case I needed it. Meanwhile, my own family was trying to shove me into a basement so I could be Emma's personal assistant. Yeah, that contrast was hard to ignore. At first, I still wasn't sure if I should take them up on their offer. But then Emma pulled some next-level nonsense that made my decision way easier. Remember how she had been slowly taking over my room while I was at school? Well, one day I came home and found her going through my desk drawers. My stuff was scattered all over the floor, and she was casually tossing things into a garbage bag. "Just clearing out some of your junk," she said, like she was doing me a favor. That so-called junk included the last birthday card my biological dad had given my mom before I was even born, one of the only things I had left of him. I snapped. I started yelling at her to get the hell out of my stuff. And of course, she immediately played the pregnancy card, fake crying about how I was stressing out the baby. That's when Rick stormed up the stairs and started screaming at me about how I needed to respect my sister. Chaos, my loyal ride or die, decided this was the perfect moment to share his own opinion on the matter. Without hesitation, he peed directly into Emma's designer diaper bag. That thing cost her $200. Best money never spent, if you ask me. That night, I texted Jake, "Hey, man, about that room." His response, "Chaos can come too. Mom already got him a cat bed." I teared up reading that message. They weren't just offering me a place to stay. They were making sure my cat would be comfortable too. The next day after school, Jake and his dad showed up with their truck. Over the past week, I had slowly been moving my most important stuff to Jake's place, so there wasn't much left to grab, just my clothes, my laptop, and Chaos's things. But you want to know the most messed up part? While I was loading up the truck, my mom finally spoke up. Not to apologize. Not to ask me to stay. Not to say anything normal. Nope. She just said, "I hope you realize this means you won't be able to help with the baby." Ma'am, that's the entire point. Emma stood in the doorway, one hand on her barely there baby bump, smirking like she had just won something. Rick? He was in his office, pretending like none of this was happening. Chaos got the last word, though. Right as we were leaving, he strutted to the front door and took a massive dump right on the welcome mat. I didn't clean it up. Felt poetic, honestly. Driving away from that house was surreal. Part of me was terrified, like, what the hell am I doing? But mostly, I felt free. When we got to Jake's house, his family had pizza waiting. His little sister had even made a welcome home sign. Their golden retriever, Max, took one look at Chaos and immediately decided to be afraid of him. Smart dog. That first night, I slept better than I had in years. Chaos immediately claimed the windowsill in my new room, my room, and gave me a look like, "Finally, you got your life together." A few months passed and I was thriving. Emma had her baby. A girl, naturally. I heard through mutual friends that she was already trying to turn herself into a mom influencer on Instagram. You know the type. Staged photos of a perfect life while probably sobbing into a glass of wine at 2 p.m. Meanwhile, I was actually doing well. I got into community college with a solid scholarship, picked up a part-time job at a gaming store, and Chaos had fully established himself as the undisputed ruler of Jake's house. Even Max, the golden retriever, had accepted his place in the new pecking order. Then, about a week ago, I got an email from my mom. Keep in mind, this was the first time she had contacted me in months. And the email? So sickeningly sweet it could have given me diabetes. Sweetie, we miss you so much. Emma really needs her brother right now. Madison. Yeah, they really named the baby that. Oh, needs her uncle. We know we made some mistakes, but family is family. Please come home for the weekend. I showed the email to Jake's mom. She rolled her eyes so hard I thought they might get stuck. Chaos, who had been reading over my shoulder, walked across my keyboard and sent a string of random letters in response. Even my cat knew this was nonsense. I ignored the email. Then, 2 days later, I got another one, even more desperate than the first. Something felt off. Why now? Why the sudden need for a family reunion? Then things got really interesting. 2 days after that second email, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I picked up, and an older woman's voice I had never heard before said, "I'm your grandmother, specifically my maternal grandmother. You know, the one who supposedly abandoned my mom when she got pregnant with Emma? The one I had never met, the one I had never even seen a picture of." I didn't believe it. I literally laughed into the phone and told her that whatever scam she was running, I wasn't buying it. I was about to hang up when she said, "Please just let us FaceTime you. We can prove who we are, us." Turns out my grandfather was there too. At this point, I figured this was either the most elaborate scam ever, or something way bigger was going on. So I agreed. And the moment they appeared on the screen, first thing I noticed, this woman had my mom's exact eyes. Still, people can look alike. That alone wasn't enough to convince me. Then they started pulling out photo albums. Pictures of my mom as a kid, her high school graduation, college photos. And not just random pictures, stories to go with each one. New details that you couldn't just find online. Then they showed me something that completely shattered everything I thought I knew. Pictures of my mom, pregnant with Emma. And the real kicker? They had photos of my dad. My real dad, not Rick. Actual, genuine pictures of my biological father. He was holding baby Emma at some family event. The same family I had been told abandoned my mom when she got pregnant with Emma. The ones who, according to my mom, were basically the devil. And that's when I realized everything I thought I knew about my family was a lie. Every single thing. For starters, my grandparents never abandoned my mom. They fully supported her decision to keep Emma. The real problem, they didn't want Rick in the picture. And why? Because back then, Rick wasn't just some jerk. He was a full-blown addict. Not, oh, he smokes sometimes kind of thing. I mean serious stuff. My grandparents had known him from the neighborhood and had witnessed firsthand what a disaster he was. So they gave my mom a choice. They'd support her and the baby. But Rick, he had to go. At first, my mom actually agreed. Remember how I mentioned my biological dad passed away when I was a baby? Well, turns out that story was way more complicated than I originally thought. My grandparents were actually the ones who introduced my mom to my dad. He was the son of some close family friends, and they thought he'd be a great match for her. And for a while, he was. They dated for 2 years, got married. It seemed perfect. Then my mom started secretly seeing Rick again. When she got pregnant with me, she just assumed Rick was my father. Spoiler alert, he wasn't. That was confirmed by a paternity test after I was born. When she finally admitted to my dad that she had been cheating, she fully expected him to walk away. But here's the thing, he didn't. My dad didn't abandon us. After the divorce, he actually fought for partial custody, and for a while he had it. Then, when I was 7 months old, he died in that car accident. After his passing, his family wanted nothing to do with me, and that made it really easy for my mom to rewrite the entire story. Oh, and you know that nice house my parents lived in? The one they kicked me out of? My grandparents bought it for them. My parents were broke and couldn't afford rent, so they reached out to my grandparents for help. Instead of telling them to deal with it themselves, which honestly would have been completely fair, my grandparents bought them an entire house. And how did my grandparents find out I'd been kicked out? Because they showed up unannounced. They'd been trying to reconnect for years, but my mom kept making excuses. Then, one day, they just decided to show up. That's when they found out about the baby, their great-granddaughter. But when they asked about me, my parents got weirdly vague. So my grandparents started digging. They talked to the neighbors. That's how they found out I hadn't been living there for months. One of the neighbor's kids went to school with me and casually mentioned that I was staying with Jake's family. My grandparents were furious, like next-level angry, especially when they heard about my mom's real grandchild comment. So they decided to return the favor. They gave my parents 30 days to move out, and they used the exact same words my parents had used on me. There's no space for you here anymore. Turns out my grandparents never signed the house over to my parents. They had always kept it in their names because they had a bad feeling about Rick. Smart people, my grandparents. And that's why my mom was suddenly so eager to reconnect. She wasn't having a change of heart. She was about to lose her house. Emma and Tyler were scrambling for a place to live. Their perfect little plans were falling apart completely. The 30 days leading up to the move-out deadline were exhausting. My mom started with fake concern, random texts about how she missed me and wanted to reconnect. When that didn't work, she showed up at Jake's house. I wasn't home, but Jake's mom handled it. Mom started with the concerned mother act, saying she just wanted to talk. When that failed, she snapped. She went on a full-blown rant about family loyalty and how I was tearing us apart. Jake's mom shut her down with a simple, "You don't get to ignore your kid for years and then expect help when it's convenient for you." That should have been the end of it. But then my mom followed up with a long-winded email full of guilt trips, going on about how family sticks together, as if she hadn't kicked me out the second I was inconvenient. Then came moving day, and it was a disaster from start to finish. They stalled as much as possible, like dragging their feet would somehow change my grandparents' minds. I'm talking day 29, and they still hadn't packed a single box. Pretty sure they thought that if they held out long enough, my grandparents would cave and let them stay. That did not happen. Emma and Tyler finally found an apartment across town, smaller than their old one and, apparently, not aesthetic enough for Emma's Instagram mom content. She's been posting these dramatic new beginning stories, going on about overcoming adversity. Like, girl, adversity? The only thing you're overcoming is the direct consequences of your own actions. The actual moving day, pure chaos. Because my grandparents, who are way better people than my mom ever deserved, hired movers to keep things organized. Didn't stop my mom from trying to turn it into a full-blown dramatic meltdown. She waited until half the house was already loaded onto the truck before cornering my grandfather in the kitchen. "Dad, please, you can't just throw us out like this. We're family." My grandfather, he calmly wiped his hands on a dish towel and said, "Funny. I don't remember family treating each other the way you did." Then Emma, because she always has to insert herself, jumped in with, "This isn't fair. We have a baby." That's when my grandmother finally spoke up. Until then, she had just been standing there, arms crossed, watching the whole thing unfold. But at that comment, she actually laughed. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, shaking her head. "Fair? You want to talk about fair? Fair is what you did to OP. Fair is taking and never giving anything back. This is long overdue." Emma stormed out after that, muttering about how the family is toxic. Tyler? He just kept packing as fast as humanly possible. Honestly, his entire future depended on it. My mom made one last attempt at a guilt trip. She stood in the driveway, tears streaming down her face, and looked directly at me. I just don't understand how you can be okay with this. Families shouldn't treat each other this way. I was about to respond, but my grandfather beat me to it. You're right, he said, completely unfazed. They shouldn't. Glad you finally figured that out. Rick? Rick barely said a word the whole time. He just kept making trip after trip to his car, loading up box after box from his office like he was on autopilot. And given what happened 2 days later, I'm guessing he was more concerned with sneaking out his sketchy side business files before anyone could find them. Turns out that was a good instinct. Because yeah, he got caught. Apparently, he had been running his little side hustle during work hours and ended up on probation at his job. Couldn't have happened to a better guy. Once they were gone, my grandparents wasted no time reclaiming their house. And honestly, it was like the entire atmosphere changed. The place felt lighter, like it had been cleansed of all the toxicity. My grandmother, she immediately set to work turning it into a real home. My grandfather completely transformed Rick's old office into a full-scale library. The entire atmosphere of the house shifted, and for the first time in years, it actually felt warm and inviting. They didn't just give me back my old bedroom either. They completely redid it. New furniture, fresh paint, and the best part, a custom-built cat tower for Chaos. Naturally, he immediately declared the entire house his personal empire, as if he'd been waiting for this exact moment his whole life. I still spend most of my time at Jake's place since it's closer to work and school, but on weekends I stay at my grandparents' house. It's strange, because that place used to feel so unwelcoming, like I didn't truly belong there. But now it actually feels like home. Oh, and Emma's GoFundMe? Reported for fraud and taken down. No clue who did it. Cough, Jake's little sister, cough. She's still trying to push her young mom overcoming adversity persona online, but people aren't buying it anymore. Her follower count keeps plummeting, which makes perfect sense, considering she can't exactly manufacture that cozy, picture-perfect family aesthetic from her new place. Meanwhile, Tyler has actually stepped up. He landed a promotion and seems way less on edge now that he's no longer living under Rick's roof. As for my mom, she still emails me every so often. The most recent one? Just a picture of Madison with the caption, "Your niece misses you." Ma'am, the child is 3 months old. She does not miss me. Nice try. Meanwhile, my grandparents? Absolutely thriving. Even though I told them they didn't have to, they've been helping me with college. And on top of that, they've been telling me all sorts of family history I never knew. My grandmother has an entire collection of old photos of my dad, and getting to hear stories about him, it's something I never even realized I needed. Oh, and Chaos? He's living his best life. At this point, he technically has 3 homes: Jake's house, my grandparents' place, and somehow Jake's aunt's house. No one knows how he managed to pull that off, but honestly, I think he's just accumulating real estate at this point. He still torments Max, of course, but they've developed this odd understanding, where Max pretends to be afraid, and Chaos pretends to be scary. It's actually kind of adorable. And me? I'm good. College is going great. My part-time job at the gaming store is actually fun. And for the first time in my life, I have real family. People who actually care about me. Sometimes I wonder how different everything would be if Emma had never gotten pregnant, if my parents had never kicked me out. But honestly, this was the best thing that could have happened, because it showed me who my real family is. So yeah, that's it. Or maybe it's just the beginning. Either way, I'm happy.